Michael Jordan discovers his childhood best friend working at a gas station, then changes his life. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, a small town where dreams were often limited by the walls of familiarity. From the outside, Wilmington seemed like a place where the future was often predictable. But for Michael, there was something about the basketball court that set his heart on fire. It was the one place where the rules of the world didn't apply, where his talent could be his ticket out of the small town and into something much bigger. In those early years, however, it wasn't just the game of basketball that defined him. His best friend, Marcus, was a constant presence by his side. They had grown up together, played basketball together, and shared many of the same dreams. Marcus was the quiet one, the kind of person who kept to himself, but he was always there. He never sought the spotlight, yet he was as dedicated to their shared dreams as Michael was. If Michael was going to be great, Marcus was going to be there to cheer him on, and for Michael, that meant everything. Basketball was their bond. Michael was the ambitious, brash one, the one who constantly pushed himself, always hungry for greatness. Marcus, on the other hand, was steady, solid, dependable, and a quiet support for Michael as he chased his dreams. Where Michael's ambition often burned brighter than the sun, Marcus's quiet confidence acted like a grounding force. They pushed each other in ways that didn't always involve words, but it was clear that neither could have made it without the other. As Michael's game began to evolve, his drive to be the best became increasingly evident. His relentless work ethic at the local gym and the hours spent shooting hoops with Marcus sharpened his focus. It didn't take long before people started to notice him. Word spread fast in Wilmington, and what had once been a hobby quickly turned into something more serious, a real shot at greatness. The question on everyone's mind wasn't whether Michael could make it, but when. Marcus, too, had the same dreams. They both spent their nights talking about what life would be like if they made it big, traveling the world, playing in front of crowds, and living a life of freedom. But life doesn't always turn out the way you plan, and sometimes, no matter how hard you work, you can't control the outcome. Michael's drive kept him on track, but Marcus found himself sidelined by the realities of life. His path seemed to grow narrower as the years passed, and the dreams he once shared with Michael began to feel like distant memories. Michael was getting better, faster, stronger. He made a name for himself in high school and then at UNC, where his abilities quickly gained attention. It wasn't just about his talent, it was about his mentality. Every game was a chance to prove himself. Every shot he made was a declaration that he was here to stay. But all the while, Marcus watched from the sidelines, never one to steal the spotlight. He was proud of Michael, but he couldn't ignore the creeping feeling that his own dreams were slipping through his fingers. He wasn't the one people talked about, and his opportunities seemed to dwindle. The distance between Michael and Marcus grew, not because of any animosity, but because the paths they were on had begun to diverge. Michael's rise in basketball was inevitable. The world saw his potential. But for Marcus, it seemed like his opportunity had passed him by. It wasn't that he hadn't tried, he had worked just as hard, and maybe harder in some ways, but sometimes, talent alone wasn't enough. The chance to make it big had slipped out of his reach, and as he watched Michael's career take off, the quiet ache of missed opportunities settled deep in his chest. It wasn't that Marcus was bitter or resentful, that wasn't in his nature. But there was a part of him that felt he had been left behind, not by Michael, but by the world. His role in Michael's success was never in question. He had always been the one there, whether it was late-night practices or early morning runs. But now, watching Michael play on television and rise to stardom, Marcus was faced with the harsh reality of his own life. He had made choices that hadn't paid off, and now, those choices seemed to have defined him in ways he hadn't expected. As Michael's college career came to an end, the NBA called, and the dream that Marcus and Michael had once shared began to become a reality for only one of them. Michael went on to become the number 1 pick in the 1984 NBA draft, an event that would forever change the course of basketball history. He had achieved what they both once dreamt of, but Marcus wasn't there. He watched from the sidelines as his best friend stepped into a new life, leaving Wilmington and the dreams they had once shared behind. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Marcus never let it show. Despite his personal struggles, Marcus kept his head down, focused on surviving. Life in Wilmington was far from glamorous, and he eventually took a job working at a local gas station. It wasn't what he had dreamed of, but it was steady work. The job wasn't glamorous, but it provided a way to make ends meet. Marcus had long ago accepted that his life wouldn't be defined by basketball, but that didn't mean he had stopped caring about it. He still followed Michael's career closely, seeing every game, every highlight, every championship win. He couldn't help but feel pride when he saw his best friend achieving what they had both once dreamed of, but it also served as a reminder of everything he had lost. Despite all this, Michael never completely lost touch with his roots. He would occasionally check in on his family in Wilmington, but the pressure of his burgeoning NBA career, the constant media attention, and the demands of his new life made it difficult to keep up with old friends. His life was a whirlwind of games, endorsements, and travel. He didn't have time to return home often, but he never forgot where he came from. Deep down, he always knew he wouldn't be where he was without the people who had supported him from the beginning, people like Marcus, who had always been there, even in the background. One fateful day, years after Michael's rise to superstardom, he found himself back in Wilmington, visiting family. It was on this visit that he would unknowingly walk into a scene that would change his life, and Marcus's, forever. He had planned on catching up with old friends and perhaps even spending some quiet time in his hometown. What he didn't expect was to find Marcus working at a rundown gas station on the outskirts of town. When Michael saw him, standing behind the counter, looking worn and tired, the recognition hit him hard. It was the same Marcus, the same friend who had stood by him all those years ago, but now he seemed so far removed from the person Michael had once known. It was an image that Michael wasn't prepared for, a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of his own life. And it made him wonder, how had things turned out this way for Marcus? What had happened to the dreams they had shared? That moment would mark the beginning of a journey that neither of them had anticipated. Michael's life, filled with fame and fortune, would soon intertwine with Marcus's reality in ways that would change both of their worlds forever. It was time for Michael Jordan to finally see his friend for who he was, and to help Marcus find his way back to the dreams they had once shared. When Michael Jordan first laid eyes on Marcus at the gas station, it was as if a weight fell upon him. The years that had passed between them seemed to melt away in an instant. But the reunion wasn't what he expected. Marcus, a man who had been by his side through the highs and lows of childhood, was now behind a counter, slinging fuel at a rundown station. The old spark in Marcus's eyes wasn't gone, but it was hidden under layers of quiet struggle and fatigue. Michael stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. This wasn't the Marcus he remembered, the guy who had always been there, pushing him to do better, encouraging him when the world was heavy on his shoulders. This Marcus was distant, a shadow of the man who had once been his closest friend. It didn't take long for Marcus to recognize him. The years hadn't dimmed Michael's star, and there was no mistaking him even in the faded light of the gas station. The two locked eyes, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary, the silence said it all. "Mike? Is that really you?" Marcus's voice broke the silence, the words hesitant, almost unsure. Michael stepped forward, a smile creeping onto his face despite the discomfort. "Yeah, it's me. Been a long time, huh?" Marcus's smile was small but genuine, yet there was something guarded in it, as if he had grown accustomed to being out of the spotlight. He had never been one to embrace attention, even when they were younger. Now, he almost seemed like he had taken solace in the shadows. "Yeah, long time," Marcus said, glancing around at the cluttered station. "I guess you could say I've been busy." He gestured around, indicating the gas station, but there was a heaviness in his words that suggested something deeper. Michael knew that what Marcus was doing now was a far cry from the dreams they'd once shared. Growing up, they had envisioned a future where they both succeeded, but Michael's path had led him to the pinnacle of basketball greatness, while Marcus had seemingly remained in the same place. Michael's life had exploded into fame, championships, and global recognition, while Marcus had quietly accepted a more humble existence. But as much as Michael wanted to ask the questions running through his mind, he held back, not wanting to pry too much into a friend's life that had clearly taken a different turn. They stood there for a moment, an awkward tension between them, before Michael broke the silence. "I had no idea you were here. What happened, man? This isn't where I thought I'd find you." Marcus didn't immediately answer. Instead, he looked down at the counter, his hands briefly rubbing the edge as if he were thinking about how to respond. Michael could sense that the words he wanted to say weren't easy to get out. They both knew that this wasn't a reunion based on nostalgia. This was about something much deeper, something Michael hadn't realized until now. "I don't know," Marcus said after a pause, his voice low. "Guess life just turned out different for me. Things didn't exactly pan out the way I hoped." Michael felt a pang of guilt. He had always assumed that Marcus, who had always been so steady, had simply chosen a different path. He never imagined that Marcus's struggles were more internal than external, that the same person who had stood by him through everything had been quietly suffering in the background, far removed from the success they had once dreamed of. Michael stepped closer, leaning against the counter. "What happened, Marcus? You were always on my side, man. We were gonna do this together." Marcus chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, well, sometimes dreams don't work out the way you want them to. I got caught up in life, in bills, in family, everything that doesn't come with a camera or a trophy." His eyes met Michael's, and there was no resentment there, just an acceptance of the reality he had found himself in. Michael felt his heart sink. He had known Marcus for so long, and yet he hadn't noticed how much his friend had quietly struggled over the years. How had he let it go on for so long without reaching out, without being there for Marcus in the way that he should have? "I should have kept in touch," Michael said softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I didn't realize things were like this for you." Marcus shook his head. "You don't need to apologize, Mike. You're living your dream. You made it big. I wasn't meant to be in the spotlight. I knew that early on. I was just a guy trying to make ends meet, like so many others. No need to feel bad for me." Michael wasn't sure how to respond. Part of him wanted to offer a solution, something grand and dramatic. After all, he was Michael Jordan, the most famous basketball player in the world. But another part of him knew that what Marcus needed wasn't a handout or a quick fix. What he needed was the kind of support that came from understanding, from knowing that someone cared enough to help him find his way again. "I'm not feeling bad for you, Marcus," Michael finally said, looking his friend in the eye. "But I want to help. You're my friend, and I don't want to see you stuck like this. You deserve more than this." Marcus sighed, his expression softening. "You can't fix everything, Mike. I've made my choices, and they brought me here. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be." Michael felt a fire burning inside him. He knew what it was like to be pushed beyond limits, to be told no and have to prove everyone wrong. He wasn't about to let his best friend, someone who had believed in him when no one else did, settle for a life that wasn't his dream. Michael had climbed mountains for his own dreams, and now it was time for him to help Marcus climb his. "I don't care where you are now, Marcus," Michael said, his voice firm with conviction. "You don't have to stay here. I can help you get back on your feet. We can do this together. I want you to have the chance to live your dream too." Marcus looked at him, uncertainty flashing across his face. "You don't have to do that. I don't need you to save me, Mike." "It's not about saving you," Michael replied. "It's about giving you the chance you never had. I know what it's like to have the whole world watching you, and I know what it's like to make it against all odds. You've been there for me. Now it's my turn." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Michael could see Marcus struggling to absorb them. It wasn't about money or fame, it was about the chance to do something more, to get out of the rut he had been stuck in for so long. Finally, Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't know, Mike. It's been a long time since I thought about doing anything other than surviving. Michael smiled, a sense of determination settling over him. You don't have to think about it right now. But I'll be here, man. Whenever you're ready, we'll figure this out together. As Michael stood up from the counter, he felt a sense of resolve. This was bigger than basketball, bigger than the fame and fortune he had achieved. This was about helping someone who had helped him become the man he was. And in that moment, Michael Jordan knew that the game of basketball wasn't the only legacy he was going to leave. He was going to change his friend's life, just as he had been changed all those years ago. But as he left the gas station that day, there was one question lingering in his mind. Could he truly help Marcus find a way out of the life he had resigned himself to? The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, Michael Jordan was ready to face it, not as a superstar, but as a friend. The following weeks after that fateful encounter at the gas station were a whirlwind for Michael. He couldn't shake the image of Marcus standing behind that counter, his shoulders slightly slumped, eyes shadowed with years of unspoken struggle. It had been a long time since they had shared anything more than a brief catch-up at family reunions or random phone calls on birthdays. But this moment, this meeting at the gas station, felt like something deeper. Michael knew he had to act, not because Marcus asked for it, but because he couldn't ignore the feeling that his best friend's life had somehow passed him by. Marcus had always been the steady one. The one who would never ask for help, who would carry his burdens quietly, even though Michael knew that he had the same dreams they shared as children. But that wasn't the reality for him now. He was working a job that he had grown to accept, even if it wasn't what he'd ever wanted. Michael understood that this was the kind of life people fell into, slowly and imperceptibly, without realizing how they had arrived there. But Marcus was not just anyone, he was his best friend, and Michael had always believed that Marcus deserved more than this. As Michael sat in his office, reviewing his schedule, he found his thoughts drifting back to Wilmington, to Marcus. The contrast between their lives couldn't have been starker. While Michael's career had taken him to places he'd never imagined, global fame, championships, endorsement deals, Marcus's path seemed to have taken a much quieter, less rewarding course. Michael's life was one of constant movement, of being in the spotlight, surrounded by people and opportunities. Marcus, on the other hand, had settled into a quiet existence, one that, from the outside, seemed content but, from Michael's perspective, seemed stifled. Despite the difference in their circumstances, the bond they shared remained as strong as ever. Michael didn't need to be reminded of the times they'd spent together growing up, the hours on the court, pushing each other to be better, to go further. They had both dreamt of success, of fame, of a life that would lift them out of Wilmington. But only one of them had made it. And Michael couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus had somehow been forgotten in all the chaos of his success. That night, Michael called Marcus. "I'm heading back to Wilmington next weekend," Michael said when Marcus picked up. "I want to see you again. Let's talk, man." There was a brief pause before Marcus responded. "Talk about what?" "I don't know yet," Michael said, his voice warm but determined. "But I want to help. You've been too quiet for too long." Marcus chuckled, though it was faint. "Mike, I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me. I've got it under control." "Come on, Marcus. Don't give me that. I saw you at the gas station. I know things haven't been easy." There was another pause, longer this time. Then Marcus spoke, his voice quieter. "I don't need charity, Mike. I'm not asking for anything. I've made my choices." "I'm not offering charity," Michael replied quickly, not wanting to let the conversation go down that path. "This isn't about giving you something you haven't earned. It's about giving you a shot. You've been working hard for years, but I don't want to see you stuck in a job that isn't what you're meant for." "I appreciate it, Mike, but," Marcus trailed off. "I don't want to go back to wishing for something that's never going to happen." Michael's heart sank. He could hear the resignation in Marcus's voice, and it cut through him. He had never seen his friend like this, defeated, hopeless, as if he had given up on any dream that wasn't tied to that gas station. "We don't know what's going to happen if we don't try," Michael said, his voice softer now. "I want to help you get back to what you've always wanted. Marcus didn't respond immediately, but Michael could hear him exhale, the tension heavy on the other end of the line. "I'll think about it," Marcus finally said. That was all Michael needed. He knew Marcus. He wasn't going to jump at the chance right away. But if Michael could get him to see that there was still a way out, a way to chase the dreams they had once shared, it would be enough. He was ready to help, ready to do whatever it took. The next weekend, Michael flew back to Wilmington. He was determined to make a real change in Marcus's life, but he knew it couldn't be done all at once. He needed to reconnect with the friend he had lost touch with, to remind Marcus of the person he used to be, the one who believed in the same dreams, the same future they had talked about for years. The reunion was awkward at first. Michael could sense the hesitance in Marcus, the wall he had built around himself to protect against any more disappointment. But Michael was patient. He took Marcus out to lunch at their old spot in town, a small diner where they had spent hours talking about basketball and life before it all got complicated. "You know, I remember when we used to sit in here," Michael said, sipping his coffee. "We'd talk about what we'd do when we got big, travel the world, live the dream." Marcus nodded, but there was something distant in his gaze. "Yeah, I remember. But you didn't just dream about it," Michael continued. "You worked for it. You put in the hours with me. You were right there with me every step of the way." Marcus shifted in his seat, looking away. "I just didn't have the same opportunities. I couldn't make it happen like you did." Michael shook his head. "Don't sell yourself short, man. You've got more in you than this job, more than what's keeping you here. We both know it." Marcus didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched between them, thick with years of unspoken words and old wounds. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Mike. I've been trying to make it work for so long, and it's like I'm stuck. I thought if I kept my head down, did the work, it'd pay off. But it didn't." Michael reached across the table, putting his hand on Marcus's. "You're not stuck, Marcus. You just need a new direction. And I'm here to help you find it." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Michael knew that this wouldn't be an easy road for Marcus to walk, but the first step had been taken. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Michael, but for Marcus as well. Michael had always been driven by the idea that anything was possible if you worked for it. And now, he was ready to help his old friend see that it wasn't too late to turn his life around. But the journey wouldn't be simple. Marcus had been in this routine for too long, too comfortable in his quiet life to break out of it. It would take time, patience, and a lot of hard work. Yet Michael was determined. His commitment wasn't just about fixing what was wrong with Marcus's life, it was about helping him rediscover the person he once was, the person who still had the power to make a difference. Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player to ever play the game, was now focusing all his energy on helping his best friend rise above his circumstances. It was a different kind of challenge, but one that he was more than ready to take on. This wasn't about fame or glory. This was about lifting someone up, someone who had always believed in him, back into the light. The following days in Wilmington were filled with small yet significant moments of change. Michael had made his commitment clear to Marcus. He wasn't just passing through, checking in on an old friend, and then moving on with his life. No, this was different. He was back for a reason, and that reason was Marcus. Michael wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but he knew it had to be taken one step at a time. The first order of business was getting Marcus to break out of his shell, to challenge the routine he had gotten used to. Marcus had spent too many years just surviving, not living. His sense of resignation hung in the air every time Michael saw him. That resignation wasn't a bad thing, it wasn't laziness or giving up, it was simply the result of trying to find meaning in a life that had turned out differently than expected. Michael didn't waste time with long speeches or motivational platitudes. Instead, he used a more direct approach, inviting Marcus to join him in some of the simple things they used to do together. Basketball was their shared language, the sport that had once connected them on a deeper level than anything else. So Michael, without saying much about it, set up a few sessions at the local gym. He wasn't expecting Marcus to jump back into competitive play, but he wanted to remind his friend of the passion they once had for the game. At first, Marcus was hesitant. The idea of playing basketball again after all these years felt distant, like a relic of a past he had put behind him. It wasn't about not having the skills, it was about the emotional weight of the years that had passed. Marcus had accepted his place in life, and the idea of reawakening dreams he'd buried felt both exhilarating and frightening. The first session at the gym was awkward. The old gym, with its cracked floors and worn-out hoops, felt like a time capsule. The sound of basketballs bouncing on the hardwood floor brought back memories of those long afternoons, when life was simpler and the world felt full of possibilities. Michael didn't push. He just played. And as he dribbled, shot, and played around, he gave Marcus the space to join in at his own pace. There was no pressure, no talk about what they could have been or should have been. It was just two old friends sharing something they both loved. After a while, Marcus began to loosen up. The stiffness in his body started to fade, and soon he was shooting baskets alongside Michael. The rhythm of the game, the familiar feeling of the ball in his hands, felt like a small victory. They weren't trying to relive the past, they were just enjoying the present. It was a simple reminder that Marcus hadn't lost everything, he still had his love for the game. The ball had always been a source of escape for both of them, and for a moment, it was doing the same for Marcus. As the weeks went by, their sessions at the gym became a routine. It wasn't about fixing everything all at once. It was about showing Marcus that he could still move forward, that there were still opportunities waiting for him. Michael didn't talk much about it at first, but he noticed that Marcus's confidence was growing. There was less hesitation in his steps, fewer moments of doubt when he took a shot. It was as if the act of simply playing basketball was unlocking something deep within him, a part of himself that he had shut away for years. But basketball wasn't the only thing Michael wanted to focus on. He could see that Marcus needed more than just physical activity, he needed a path forward. Over the next few weeks, Michael made a concerted effort to get Marcus thinking about what he wanted to do with his life beyond just working at the gas station. He didn't force anything, he simply gave Marcus the space to dream again. They spent hours talking, not about the past, but about what Marcus wanted in the future. Michael had made it clear that he didn't have all the answers, but he was there to help Marcus figure it out. It wasn't about trying to live up to some idealized version of success, it was about finding what truly mattered to Marcus. There were times when their conversations were uncomfortable. Marcus would often bring up how much time he had wasted, how he felt like he was too far gone to make a real change. But Michael wouldn't let him settle into that mindset. He reminded him that it was never too late to change direction. One evening, Michael took Marcus out to dinner at the same restaurant where they used to hang out after games. It had the same smell, the same feel, only now, it was just the two of them, sitting in a quiet booth. Marcus was quieter than usual, his mind clearly racing with thoughts of his own. Michael wasn't in a hurry to fill the silence. He let Marcus speak when he was ready. After a long pause, Marcus finally spoke up. "Mike, I've been thinking a lot. I don't know where to start, you know? I've been stuck in this rut for so long. It's hard to imagine getting out of it." Michael nodded, his voice steady. "I get it. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. The first step is just believing that you can take it. You've always had the ability, Marcus. It's just about finding what you want to do next." Marcus stared down at his plate, the weight of the conversation heavy in the air. "I used to think about getting into coaching. Basketball, you know? But it feels like such a distant dream now. I haven't been in the game in years." Michael leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. "You're not too old, Marcus. And you're not too far gone. You've got experience, knowledge, and you've seen what it takes to win. I know you've got what it takes to help others see the game in the way that you did. You can be a coach, and you can teach kids what you know. It's not too late." Marcus looked up at him, eyes searching Michael's face for any sign of doubt. But Michael was serious. There was no question in his mind. Marcus had always been a natural leader, he just needed someone to remind him of that. I don't know, Marcus trailed off, still unsure. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? Michael smiled. So what? That's the beauty of it. There's no such thing as failure, Marcus. There's only learning and growing. You've already taken the hardest step by getting back into the game. Now it's just about moving forward, one step at a time. The words seemed to settle on Marcus, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to argue. He knew that Michael wasn't offering a fairy tale solution, he was offering a chance. Marcus felt the faint stirrings of hope that had been buried beneath years of doubt. Maybe it was possible after all. The following week, Michael connected Marcus with some of his own basketball contacts. It wasn't a fast track to coaching a professional team, but it was a start. Michael set up meetings for Marcus to talk to local schools about coaching positions, and he helped him update his resume. There was no magic formula, no guaranteed success, but Michael was offering him the one thing Marcus had been missing, belief in himself. Marcus didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long while, he had something to look forward to. And that, for Marcus, was worth everything. As they walked out of the restaurant, Michael clapped his friend on the back. You're not alone in this, Marcus. We've got this. Marcus smiled, the faintest trace of hope in his eyes. Yeah. We'll see. It wasn't a promise. It was a beginning, a fresh start for two old friends, walking toward a future they hadn't yet figured out but were willing to explore together. The weeks following Marcus's decision to explore coaching were a mixture of hope and hesitation. The initial spark of possibility, ignited by Michael's encouragement, had begun to fade a little as the reality of taking action set in. Marcus began applying for local coaching positions, but the doubt that had plagued him for years crept in, pulling him back into old patterns of self-doubt. He'd never been one to chase the limelight, and the thought of being in a position where others would look to him for guidance felt strange, almost foreign. His inner voice whispered that he wasn't ready, that maybe it was too late. Michael knew that Marcus's greatest challenge wasn't going to be finding the job, it was overcoming the mental block that had held him in place for so long. He had been a steady, reliable figure, but that stability came at a price. Now, Michael found himself not only helping Marcus navigate practical steps, like applying for jobs and prepping for interviews, but also reminding him of the confidence he once had. It wasn't easy. Marcus had spent too many years living in a world that limited his own vision, and Michael had to slowly convince him that there was more out there. One afternoon, Michael sat down with Marcus in his living room. The space was modest, filled with the echoes of a life lived with restraint and survival, rather than the pursuit of dreams. They were sipping coffee, and Marcus had been quieter than usual, not offering much about his progress. "Have you heard back from the schools?" Michael asked, leaning back in his chair. Marcus nodded, but his face remained impassive. "A couple of callbacks. No offers yet." Michael studied him for a moment. "That's good. It's a start. What are you feeling about it?" "I don't know," Marcus replied, his hands tightening around his cup. "I keep thinking I'm not the guy they want. I don't have a flashy resume. It's just me, you know? A guy who used to play but didn't make it big." Michael smiled softly. "You've got more to offer than anyone realizes. You've been a part of this game longer than most of these young coaches have been alive. You're not just someone who played, you know how to teach it. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the game. That's valuable." Marcus sighed, setting his cup down. "It's not that easy, Mike. I don't know if I can bring what they need. What if I'm not as good as I think I am? What if I can't make a difference?" Michael stood and walked over to the window, looking out over the small backyard. He didn't know how to make Marcus see what he saw, a man full of untapped potential, not just as a coach, but as someone who had something to offer the world. Instead of offering more words, Michael turned back to his friend and said, "You'll never know unless you try." The conversation wasn't over, but it was enough to plant a seed. Over the next few weeks, Michael helped Marcus prepare for the interviews in a way that only someone who had been through countless high-pressure moments could. He coached him on how to communicate his strengths, how to frame his experiences as a valuable asset to a team. But Michael didn't just give him the answers, he encouraged Marcus to rely on his instincts, to remember that coaching wasn't about being flashy or having a prestigious resume. It was about understanding the game and understanding people. It was about leadership and helping others rise to their full potential. Despite his nerves, Marcus's confidence began to grow. The first few interviews were rough. He fumbled through some questions, second-guessed his responses, and left wondering if he was even cut out for the role. But Michael was there, picking him up after each setback, offering advice, a listening ear, and a reminder that nothing worth having comes easily. Then, one day, Marcus got a call. "It's from the high school in town," Marcus said, his voice shaky. "They want me to come in for a second interview." The moment felt like a small victory. Marcus had made it past the first hurdle. Michael, though excited for him, kept his usual calm demeanor. "That's great, man. You're on your way. Just remember, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for someone who can relate to the players, someone who understands the game, and someone who can help these kids become better than they think they are. You've got that in spades." The second interview was better than the first. Marcus spoke with more confidence, relying on the experiences he had accumulated over the years, not just as a player, but as someone who had seen the highs and lows of the game. He shared stories about playing in high school, what it felt like to push through tough times, and the lessons he had learned on and off the court. A week later, the call came. "I got it," Marcus said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "I got the job." Michael grinned. "I knew you would." For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt the weight of his past begin to lift. The thought of coaching, of leading a team, of teaching the game that had always been his passion, suddenly felt like something he was ready to embrace. It wasn't the career he'd once imagined, the path that Michael had walked. But it was his own path, and that made it just as valuable. The new chapter began in the most unexpected way. Marcus walked into the school gym as the new assistant coach, filled with a mix of nervous energy and excitement. The gym was alive with the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, the echoes of shouting players, and the buzz of basketball practice. It was everything he had dreamed about, only now, he wasn't a player. He was the coach. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus spent his days getting to know the players, learning their strengths and weaknesses, and slowly building a connection with them. His quiet, steady demeanor was exactly what the team needed. He wasn't the loud, flashy kind of coach. Instead, he led by example, showing up every day with a willingness to work just as hard as the players. The respect he earned wasn't given based on his past glory or accolades, it was earned through his commitment and understanding of what it meant to work hard, to struggle, and to grow. He found himself teaching players not just about the game, but about life. He reminded them that setbacks were part of the process, that success wasn't always a straight line. And, as he spent more time with the team, he began to realize that his own journey was just as important as his players. They were learning from him, yes, but he was also learning from them. He was finally seeing that the dream he had once believed was lost wasn't gone at all. It had simply taken a different shape. When the first game of the season came around, Marcus stood on the sidelines, watching his players take the court. He had been there before, on the other side of things, but now, his role was different. He wasn't chasing his own dream anymore. He was helping someone else chase theirs. And that, in a way, felt just as important. The game wasn't perfect. They didn't win by a landslide, but they played with heart. They gave everything they had, just like Marcus had always done in his own career. And as the final whistle blew and the players left the court, Marcus looked up into the stands, where Michael sat quietly, smiling. It wasn't a championship game, but it was a victory nonetheless. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he had come full circle. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living again. And for that, he had Michael to thank. The road had been long, but it had led him to a place of purpose, a place where he could make a difference, not just for himself, but for the next generation. Michael had given him more than just a chance to coach. He had given him a chance to live out the dreams they had once shared, just in a different way. Months had passed since Marcus had started his journey as a coach. The initial excitement of landing the job had settled into the routine of daily practices, games, and the quiet but consistent work that came with being a mentor. Though it was far from glamorous, Marcus found a sense of purpose in his new role. It wasn't the bright lights of the NBA or the global recognition he had once envisioned, but it was his own path. And more than that, it was a path that was starting to bear fruit. He could see the changes in his players, how they had begun to trust him, how they started believing in themselves, not just as basketball players, but as people. Marcus had always been the quiet one, the one who led by example, and now he saw his influence starting to grow in ways he had never expected. His players respected his calm demeanor, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way he could break down the game in a way that felt personal to each of them. But what was most surprising to Marcus was how much he had changed. Coaching had reawakened something in him that he hadn't realized he'd lost: his belief in the process, his confidence in the power of hard work, and the joy of seeing someone else succeed. For years, he had seen his own dreams slip away, thinking that perhaps they weren't meant to be. But now, in the gym every day, working with the team, he realized that the dreams hadn't gone anywhere, they had simply evolved. He didn't need to be an NBA star to make a difference. What mattered was his ability to inspire, to give others the tools to push beyond their limits, just like Michael had done for him all those years ago. Still, there were moments when Marcus would find himself wondering about the path he had taken. His doubts would resurface, sometimes creeping in during the quiet moments of the day when he wasn't actively engaged in practice. He would look at the other coaches, some with far more experience, some with more impressive credentials, and wonder if he was really cut out for this. But whenever those thoughts came, he would push them aside, reminding himself that he wasn't here to be perfect, he was here to be real, to connect with the kids, and to show them what he had learned over the years. That was enough. On the nights when he would watch the NBA games on TV, he sometimes felt the tug of what might have been. Michael's career had only continued to rise, his legacy cemented as the greatest to ever play the game. Watching Michael on TV was a reminder of everything Marcus had hoped for, but it was also a reminder of the friendship they shared, and how far they had both come since those childhood days in Wilmington. He never resented Michael for his success. In fact, he was proud of him. But there was always that quiet longing, the part of him that still wondered what it would have been like if their paths had stayed the same. One evening, after a particularly hard-fought practice, Marcus received a call from Michael. He hadn't heard from him in a few weeks, and the sound of Michael's voice on the other end of the line brought a warmth that he hadn't realized he missed. "Hey, Marcus," Michael said, his voice full of familiarity. "How's it going? How are the boys doing?" Marcus smiled at the question. He had grown comfortable with Michael's genuine interest in his life, something he hadn't always experienced from others. "They're doing well, Mike. They're improving. Slowly but surely. I can see the progress. But it's been tough, man. I sometimes wonder if I'm doing enough for them." Michael's voice softened. "You're doing more than enough, Marcus. You're there for them. You show up every day. You give them everything you've got. That's all anyone can ask for. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real." Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking about the many days he'd spent questioning himself. "I'm just trying to make sure they don't fall into the same traps I did. I want them to understand that they've got a future ahead of them, more than just what happens on the court." Michael was quiet for a moment, as if processing Marcus's words. Then he responded with something that surprised Marcus. "You know, you might be teaching them more than you think. I've been watching you, and I see the impact you're having. You're showing them what it means to be a man, not just a player. You're teaching them how to deal with setbacks, how to keep pushing, no matter what." The words hit Marcus like a wave. "You think so?" "I know so," Michael said. "You've got a gift for this, Marcus. Not everyone can do what you're doing. You're not just coaching basketball. You're coaching life." The conversation lingered in Marcus's mind long after they had hung up. Michael's words had always carried weight, but now they carried a new meaning. It wasn't just about teaching the game, it was about teaching the lessons that came with it, the ones that helped shape character and resilience. The same lessons Michael had taught him when they were growing up in Wilmington, lessons that had helped him survive, and eventually thrive, in the world of professional basketball. That night, Marcus found himself reflecting on his journey. He had spent so many years feeling like an afterthought, watching from the sidelines as others achieved what he had once dreamed of. But now, as a coach, he saw that his purpose was something deeper than just the game. He wasn't just reliving his past or trying to fulfill some lost dream. He was living out his own version of success, a success that was measured not in points scored or games won, but in the difference he made in others' lives. As the weeks passed, the team began to respond to Marcus's leadership. The kids weren't perfect, but they were beginning to understand the importance of discipline, hard work, and perseverance. They were learning the fundamentals of the game, but more importantly, they were learning how to approach life with the same mindset. Marcus wasn't just teaching them how to play basketball, he was teaching them how to face challenges, how to deal with defeat, and how to rise again when they fell. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the frustration built up, when the team didn't perform as expected, or when individual players struggled with their own personal battles. But Marcus stayed patient. He stayed consistent. He was the rock they could depend on. And in return, they began to trust him more, to believe in his message. One of the most rewarding moments for Marcus came when one of his players, a quiet kid who had always been overlooked by the rest of the team, hit the game-winning shot in a tight match. The gym erupted in cheers, and Marcus couldn't help but smile as he watched the kid bask in the glory of his moment. It wasn't just the shot that mattered, it was the journey that led to it. The hours of practice, the lessons about resilience, the belief in himself that Marcus had helped foster. That night, as Marcus drove home, he realized something important. His own dreams had never truly died. They had simply taken a different form. Coaching wasn't just a way to relive his past, it was a new way to fulfill his purpose. He wasn't just helping the kids on his team succeed. He was helping himself succeed, too. Marcus's journey wasn't about comparing himself to Michael or anyone else. It wasn't about living up to expectations. It was about carving out a path that was uniquely his own, one that allowed him to make a lasting impact. And for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace with it. As Marcus continued his work with the team, he knew he wasn't done. There were still challenges ahead, more hurdles to overcome. But now, he felt ready for whatever came next. He was no longer waiting for someone else to give him the opportunity. He had taken it himself, and he was going to make the most of it. For the first time in years, Marcus believed in the power of second chances. And in doing so, he had finally found the success he had been searching for all along. Months passed, and as Marcus continued his journey as a coach, the transformation within him became more and more apparent. The quiet, reserved man who had once thought of his dreams as lost was now emerging as a leader, someone who was making a real difference in the lives of his players. The team, too, was growing, slowly but surely, under Marcus's guidance. They weren't the most talented team on the court, but they were beginning to play with heart, discipline, and a belief in themselves that hadn't been there before. But with progress came challenges. As the season wore on, Marcus was faced with more than just the pressures of coaching. He was also dealing with the emotional weight of the past, his feelings of inadequacy, his doubts, and the fear that he wasn't doing enough. The players might not have seen it, but Marcus sometimes wondered if he had it in him to keep going. The moments of doubt came in waves, sometimes hitting him when things were going well, sometimes when things weren't. The question of whether he was truly cut out for this role lingered in the back of his mind. One evening after practice, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the stack of papers on his desk. He could hear the sound of his players laughing and talking as they left the gym, but inside, he felt disconnected, unsure of what the next step should be. The pressure to succeed was always there, but lately, it had become louder. The weight of his past and the idea that he might be failing these kids crept in when he was alone. As he leaned back in his chair, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. "Hey, man. How's it going? Got some time to talk? Marcus stared at the message for a moment, the tension in his chest loosening slightly. Michael's words had always carried weight, but now they felt like a lifeline. He didn't hesitate. Yeah, I have time. Call me. A few minutes later, Michael's familiar voice came through the line. How's the team doing? How are you holding up? Marcus leaned forward, running a hand through his hair. They're doing all right. We've had some good wins, but it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm not getting through to them. I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this job, you know? There was a pause on the other end, then Michael's calm voice replied, I get it. But listen, Marcus, you've already done something incredible. You've turned that team around, even when it wasn't easy. What you've done for those kids isn't about whether you're perfect. It's about showing them what hard work, dedication, and perseverance really look like. You've got more to offer than you know. You're doing the right thing. Marcus sighed, the weight of his doubts pressing down. I don't know, Mike. Sometimes it feels like I'm not doing enough. Like I'm not the right person to teach them what they need to know. I wasn't some superstar, you know? I don't have that pedigree. Michael's voice softened, more like a friend than a mentor. You're right about one thing, you weren't a superstar, Marcus. But that's exactly why you're the right person for this. You've been through the struggle. You know what it's like to work for something, to fight for it, and to come up short. You get it. And those kids, they need that. They need someone who knows what it's like to face adversity and still push forward. You're giving them something that no amount of talent or fancy degrees could teach them. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, letting Michael's words sink in. He had always known that what made him different wasn't his lack of success, but his ability to empathize, to understand the struggles that his players were going through. He had lived those struggles. He had spent years fighting for something that always seemed out of reach. And maybe, just maybe, that was the very thing that could make him the coach they needed. I never thought about it like that, Marcus said finally, his voice filled with a mix of surprise and understanding. I guess I've been so focused on what I didn't have that I've forgotten what I do have to offer. Michael chuckled softly. We all get caught up in that sometimes. But trust me, you've got everything you need. Just keep showing up. Keep being you. The rest will come. That conversation was a turning point for Marcus. Over the next few weeks, he began to shift his focus. Instead of measuring his worth by the wins and losses, he started to measure it by the small victories, the moments when his players improved, when they trusted each other more, when they pushed through their own limits. He realized that his impact wasn't just about the game, it was about teaching life lessons, about showing his players how to overcome their fears, how to face adversity, and how to never give up, even when things seemed impossible. Marcus's renewed confidence began to show. His approach became less about managing the team and more about leading it. He spent more time talking with his players individually, getting to know their struggles and their dreams. He shared his own story with them, the story of a guy who had been on the verge of giving up, who had faced setbacks, but who had never stopped believing in the value of hard work. And slowly, as they opened up to him, he could see the change. They were starting to believe in themselves, not just as basketball players, but as individuals capable of achieving more than they thought possible. One of the most powerful moments came during a tough game against their biggest rival. The game was intense, and with only seconds left on the clock, the team was down by 3 points. Marcus had his doubts. He could feel the weight of the game on his shoulders, the pressure of needing to deliver. But as he watched his players huddle together, he knew they weren't just looking to him for answers, they were looking to each other. In that moment, Marcus realized that his job wasn't to carry the team, it was to empower them, to help them see the strength within themselves. The final play was drawn up, and when the ball was passed to a player who had struggled all season, Marcus knew it wasn't about making the shot, it was about the confidence to take it. The player hesitated, then fired. The ball sailed through the air, the buzzer sounding just as it went through the net, sending the gym into a roar of celebration. The team had won, but more importantly, they had done it together. They had trusted each other, and they had trusted themselves. As the celebration died down and Marcus walked off the court, he felt a deep sense of pride, not just in the victory, but in the growth he had witnessed. The team wasn't the same group of players he had started with. They were stronger, more cohesive, more confident. And so was he. The journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, more games to win, more lessons to learn. But Marcus had finally found his stride. The doubts still lingered from time to time, but they no longer defined him. He knew that his place on this team wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, day after day, ready to lead with heart, ready to teach, ready to inspire. For the first time in years, Marcus believed that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He wasn't living someone else's dream, he was living his own. And in doing so, he was helping others find their own paths, just as Michael had once helped him find his. As the season came to a close, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The team, once unsure of itself, had grown into a confident, tight-knit group that played with passion, grit, and a sense of purpose. They weren't the most talented team on paper, but what they lacked in skill, they made up for with heart and determination. It was a lesson Marcus had been teaching them all season, and it was a lesson he had come to learn for himself. The championship was still months away, but for Marcus, the real victory had already been won. The team had found their rhythm, and Marcus had found his place. He wasn't just a coach anymore. He was a mentor, a leader, and, more importantly, a person who had finally discovered his own worth. The self-doubt that had haunted him for so long no longer defined him. He had earned the respect of his players, and he had earned his own respect. On the last day of the season, after the final game had been played and the team celebrated their hard-earned victories, Marcus found himself standing alone in the gym. The echo of bouncing basketballs and excited voices had faded. It was just him, the empty court, and the quiet hum of the lights overhead. He hadn't expected it to feel like this, a quiet peace, a sense of fulfillment that hadn't come from a scoreboard or a trophy. In the stillness, Marcus realized that this had always been the journey he needed. He had spent so many years looking at what he didn't have, wondering why he hadn't been the one to make it big, wondering why life hadn't handed him the success he had dreamed of. But now, he understood that the path he had taken, the one that had seemed like a detour for so long, had been the right one all along. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. "You did it, man. I'm proud of you." Marcus smiled as he read the words. The message wasn't grand, but it was enough. It was everything he had needed to hear. Michael had always been the one to push him, to believe in him when Marcus couldn't believe in himself. Now, it wasn't about basketball glory. It was about seeing Marcus become the person he had always known he could be. As Marcus sat in the empty gym, he thought back to the days when they had talked about their dreams, how they had imagined a future where they were both on top of the world. He had never thought their lives would take such different paths, but in a way, it had all come full circle. The friendship they had shared wasn't defined by what they achieved. It was defined by the support they had given each other, the way they had pushed each other to be better, and the way they had always been there when one needed the other. Marcus picked up his phone and typed a quick reply to Michael. "Thanks, Mike. I couldn't have done it without you." The next morning, as he prepared to leave for another round of practices and games, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led him to this moment. Coaching wasn't just about teaching the game, it was about helping his players discover their own strength, their own resilience, and their own potential. It was about giving them the tools to succeed, not just on the court, but in life. Later that week, the team gathered for their final meeting of the season. Marcus stood at the front of the room, looking at the young faces that had come to rely on him. The boys were more than players now, they were a family. They had grown together, laughed together, and fought through challenges together. And though the season had come to an end, the bond they shared wasn't going anywhere. "I'm proud of each and every one of you," Marcus began, his voice steady. "You've all shown what it means to work hard, to push through the tough times, and to believe in each other. We may not have won the biggest trophy, but we've won something even more important: respect. You guys have shown that when you work together, there's nothing you can't achieve. The room was quiet as the players absorbed his words. Then one of the players, the same one who had made that game-winning shot weeks ago, stood up. "Coach," the kid said, his voice unsteady but full of emotion. "You showed us how to keep going, even when we felt like giving up. We've learned more than just basketball from you." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. The kids weren't just talking about basketball, they were talking about the lessons he had instilled in them about life. The confidence, the determination, the willingness to keep fighting no matter how hard it got. In that moment, Marcus realized that the impact he had made went far beyond the game. "You're welcome," Marcus replied, his voice thick. "But remember this, you guys did all the hard work. You showed up every day, you put in the effort. You made this happen." As the players filed out of the room, one by one, Marcus stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the season settle over him. It hadn't been perfect. There were mistakes, setbacks, moments when he had questioned himself and wondered if he was the right person for the job. But the progress he had seen in his players, the way they had grown, was more than enough. That night, Marcus met Michael for a quiet dinner at a local restaurant. It had become their tradition over the years, catching up, talking about life, sharing what they had learned. Michael sat across from him, a proud smile on his face. "You did it, man. You really did it," Michael said, raising his glass in a toast. "I knew you had it in you." Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mike. You were the one who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Michael shook his head. "You always had the ability, Marcus. You just needed to see it for yourself." The rest of the evening passed by in comfortable conversation, but Marcus knew that something had changed inside of him. He had finally come to terms with the fact that he didn't need to be a superstar to make a difference. He had spent so many years measuring his worth by the success he had seen others achieve, but now, he understood that the true measure of success wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the impact you had on the lives of those around you. As the night came to an end, Michael clapped Marcus on the back, a familiar gesture of camaraderie. "I'm proud of you, man. Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his old friend. It wasn't just the words, it was the years of support, the encouragement, and the unwavering belief that had kept him going. Michael's legacy wasn't just in his championships or his iconic moments on the court. It was in the way he had lifted others up, the way he had shown Marcus how to overcome obstacles and rise above. As Marcus walked out of the restaurant that night, he felt lighter, more at peace. He wasn't the man he had once been, defined by his past struggles and doubts. He had become someone new, someone capable of making a real difference in the world. And in that moment, he knew that his journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The season had come to an end, but Marcus's story was far from finished. He was no longer just surviving, he was living. And that, for him, was the greatest victory of all.